What chance did a woman have in a naval courtroom where even the law was written by men who believed piracy was unnatural in a woman? The answer, as history coldly reveals, was almost none. Captured female pirates were rarely offered mercy. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the so-called Golden Age of piracy British Admiralty courts showed little tolerance for piracy of any kind. But female defendants were seen as doubly transgressive. They had violated not only imperial law, but gender norms deeply embedded in society. Trials took place in makeshift naval tribunals, often held in colonies like Jamaica or New Providence. These courts operated without juries, and the outcomes were typically predetermined. The legal process was swift but theatrical. Testimonies were gathered from ship captains, naval officers, and frightened sailors who feared their own association with piracy. The accused had few legal rights. And Bonny and Mary Read, two of the most notorious female pirates in history, stood trial in 1720 in Spanish Town, Jamaica. According to the official court transcript, when Bonny was condemned to death, she retorted bitterly to her lover, Calico Jack, "If you had fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog." Their defense: pregnancy. Known as pleading the belly, it was one of the few legal protections afforded to women. In Bonny and Read's case, it worked temporarily. But most female pirates did not share their luck. Many faced their verdicts in silence, knowing the court had already judged them guilty long before they ever spoke. The river rolled silently past Wapping, but the cries of the crowd shattered the morning calm. Here, at London's infamous execution dock, countless pirates-men and women met their end, dangling from the gallows just above the murky waters of the Thames. Under British maritime law, piracy was a capital crime. The Piracy Act of 1698 made clear that all and every person so offending shall suffer pains of death. The chosen site execution dock served as a grim symbol. Pirates would die with the tide that had once given them freedom. Women found guilty of piracy were sentenced with the same finality as men. The executions followed a cruel ritual. The condemned were led from Newgate Prison, paraded through London in a cart under armed guard, jeered at by crowds. Once at Wapping, they stood under the gallows, sometimes with a noose already tightened around their necks. They were not dropped with a long fall to ensure quick death. The short drop caused prolonged strangulation, a method known as the Marshal's Dance. Though female pirate executions were fewer in number, they were no less brutal. Mary Critchett, an American woman who joined a crew of escaped convict-sterned pirates in 1729, was captured near Virginia and tried in Williamsburg. Found guilty of piracy, she was sentenced to death and hanged without fanfare, without delay. These public executions were meant not just to punish, but to terrify. The bodies of the worst offenders were left hanging until 3 tides had washed over them, a punishment called jibbiting. While more common for male pirates, the very threat was a message: piracy would not be forgiven, regardless of gender. Before the rope, many female pirates felt the whip. Flogging, an ancient and excruciating punishment, was frequently used by naval authorities to inflict public humiliation and physical agony on captured pirates. For women, this punishment carried an added layer of spectacle. Their bodies became instruments of warning, and crowds were expected to learn through their suffering. Flogging was typically administered with the cat o' nine tails, a brutal whip capable of tearing flesh with each strike. Sentences could range from 12 lashes to over 100. The punishment was carried out publicly, often on the docks where townspeople, including women and children, would gather to witness the spectacle. Not every captured female pirate was marched to the gallows. In some cases, particularly in colonial ports, women were forced into lives of concubinage, coerced labor, or slavery. While direct evidence of this fate specifically for female pirates is sparse, captured women aboard pirate ships, especially those of African or indigenous descent, were often sold into bondage, regardless of their status as crew members. Archival records from colonial ports describe women taken from pirate ships and processed as spoils of war. In such cases, they were absorbed into plantation economies or kept as domestic servants by colonial officials. For some captured female pirates, death did not come swiftly at the gallows, it came slowly, silently, and out of sight aboard rotting hulks of prison ships. These floating prisons were never designed for prolonged confinement. Yet they became holding places for pirates, rebels, and those considered enemies of the crown, including women. Conditions aboard these ships were horrendous. Prisoners were shackled below deck in cramped, dark holds, exposed to disease and starvation. Many endured exploitation and severe mistreatment with no legal recourse. On these silent decks, history did not record executions. It recorded absence forgotten not by accident, but by design. The punishments imposed on female pirates: branding, public chaining, the arena, the scourge, and the mines revealed an empire willing to sacrifice human dignity to guard its social order. These acts reshaped power by broadcasting terror. As we remember these stories, we must reflect on the echoes of such brutality in our own society. What does it mean when authority is wielded without humanity? How do we ensure that history does not repeat itself? Comment below which punishment most starkly illustrates the extremes of human rule versus resistance. As Tacitus wrote, "The more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws."